All right, we've got a stream going. I'm watching myself right now. This looks really weird. Let's see if the audio is working too. Yeah, going. I'm watching myself right now. This looks really weird. There I am. Let's see if the audio is working too. Okay, yeah, going. Perfect. All right, so I'm gonna mute this. So I'm really excited to be here streaming, actually. I've experimented with this, I think, a few times before, say 5 streams in total, probably almost 2 years ago. And I actually really liked it at the time, but just didn't work out in terms of timing and motivation and all that kind of stuff. But I am once again starting up some streaming, and my idea is that I'm going to be running programming streams and design streams, which I guess is a really loose definition, where I'm kind of just working on some of my design projects. And by design projects, I don't mean like websites or anything like that per se, but more like furniture or little robotics, things like that. There's a lot of stuff I have on like a to build list, and I want to just keep working along on those. And I also want to get better at using my computer to make little software tools to help with all of those things. So all that being said, I'm just streaming little bits at a time, trying to get into things, get in the workflow of actually completing projects and all that. And just over time, I love the medium of streaming, and I want to just get better at doing it myself, because it seems like a lot of fun. Well, I know it's a lot of fun because I've done it before and it's really great. I just got to practice and get better. So that's what this is. This is a work in progress, of course. And probably today I'm only going to stream for about an hour, just because I need to get myself into that groove again. And like I said, I'm doing programming, and I'm going to get into what I'm working on in a minute, but I want to show this first. I've got like a bunch of screens showing me all the same stuff, so I'm looking in weird spots, but anyway. So what I have on the screen now it's Emacs, and I can explain why I use Emacs later, but it's not important. So I've got here a little spot where I can write notes here. I'm using inside Emacs, there's a thing called org mode that lets you do stuff like write headings and subheadings, and then you can use that, you can collapse them. You can also, if I have another subheading, you can swap them like that. So you can like quickly reorder the stuff you're writing. It's also really nice inside. So here, this is a different document, but it's also org mode. You can do this is an example scratch spot. You can put code blocks in there, and so I write in Clojure, which is another thing I can get into as to why, but I really love Clojure. It's a lot of fun. You can write code blocks, and then you can actually run them. In the case of Clojure and how I have this set up, I'm going to run it, and it's not going to display in here. It's actually going to go over here, which is a REPL, read eval print loop here, and REPL. But anyway, so if I go like this, it sends that over to the REPL, and then it runs it. So here it just showed me the result here of multiply 2 with 2. You can also type directly in here. 2 by 6 is going to give me 12. And that's the basic setup of this. Now, I'll be honest, I love Emacs. There's a lot of great stuff about it, but like as you can see, I just switched the theme today, and I have this background color difference here. I don't know why that's there, so I have to poke around in all my setting files and stuff like that. So it's certainly not a flawless editor, but when you're working with a Lisp programming language like Clojure is, basically all the tutorials are going to kind of point you towards something like Emacs. Now, I do know so this here is VS Code. I do know there are some great plugins for VS Code. I just haven't got around to setting that up because this hasn't been enough of a problem to switch over or anything like that. Now, since I'm going to be doing more programming and more Clojure work and all that kind of stuff, I really do want to revisit my workflow sooner rather than later, because what I've got set up is kind of cool, but there's some flaws in the system, but that's okay. The reason, to get back to org mode for a minute, here you see you can cycle through showing and hiding things. The reason I like the idea of org mode is for this concept called literate programming. And what literate programming, the idea is that your documentation and your code are pretty much, they're basically the same document. And then, so you write prose to explain what you need to do, and then you can insert a code section, and that code section is the implementation of what you were describing. So it's almost like a thinking tool, right? Where you're writing documentation for the humans and then the code for the computer, kind of all in one document. And then you can run on save. There's a thing in Emacs called Tangle that will take the code blocks and just append them in the order you specify into the file that you specify. So that just basically means you can set up the code structure inside the file itself, and it'll just, on save, it'll just push all the code blocks into that file, which means you can, let's say for whatever reason you need to describe a function A after you show function B. So in the documentation, for whatever reason, it might make sense to have them this way, but you want them in your code to be this way. Now, you can tangle them that way. You can just specify the ordering. So maybe this is hard to understand, and maybe I'll show it in more detail later, but I have a spot up here called code structure, and all of these are little, like, these are the names of all the snippets, and this is where the file that they're saved to here. But I can just copy this or cut it and put it here, and the code will swap around in the file itself. Now this is kind of where I run into some problems with my Emacs setup. It's really great and it's really cool when you're kind of prototyping some stuff and you don't really know what the architecture of your code's going to be. You can just move things around kind of wherever, right? Like I could put the namespace all the way at the bottom here if I wanted, or put it back at the top, or if I want the parser to be defined later, and all of that stuff. You can just move it all around, but it can lead to some sort of weird workflows that I don't love. Like if I'm running code in the REPL here and loading code from the file here, and then also running some code in the terminal, you can, if you're not paying attention, you may have not tangled the files, and then the code in the terminal is not the most recent code, and it can get all messy. So that is not really what I want. The problem is I don't know what I do want. So that's something I'll have to figure out over time. Now, I guess I could... What should I go into next? Well, okay. So what am I even working on? What is this anyway? The workflow of it aside, what is this file even? If you look here, I call it stylo.org. Stylo or stylo is like the French word for pen. And this is a Clojure library that I'm working on that lets you basically it's a markdown. It takes markdown with extensions and then produces a nice looking HTML document. And the reason that I built this is because I make quilt patterns for my mom. My mom, she quilts all the time, and she, like, on graph paper, she'll like draw out the diagrams and stuff like that, and then she wants to make a PDF of those and then sell them on her website. But she could learn how to do all that herself, but she is much better at doing the quilting and doing the design work and then sending to me the sketches and stuff and the text to basically compile a nice document. So I kind of do it by hand, but I'm working on this library so that I can kind of automate a lot of that work and do less of the manual stuff over time. And Clojure I found to be a great language to do that in, and just it's a lot of fun. Now, I'm not a programmer by trade or school or anything like that, so all of this kind of stuff I have to kind of learn on my own, which is great, but it does mean sometimes I might not know precisely what to do next. But I love learning how to do that stuff as I go, and I'm still managing to make really nice documents for my mom's quilt patterns. Simultaneously, I'm using it for my own stuff too, but I can get into that in a little bit. I'll actually show some of this stuff working now because that might just be clearer overall. Let's see. I'm going to start actually by just running from the terminal the code I have so far. So I have here just a very, very simple example markdown file, right? So this means it's a heading, H1 heading, and then this is just text for paragraphs. And I think this will work. I've been messing around with stuff, so it's possible that it might not. But that's what this stuff is here to do. I'm here to figure it out, fix things up, make things better, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to run this argument. It's a mess because I'm running out of my dev stuff. I haven't compiled the code or anything like that. So this is not user-friendly yet. So I'm going to cat the example MD file, pipe it into xargs, and that's just so that it turns it into a command, and it's going to pass it to the Clojure thing here, and this is the namespace of the main file that I'm running. So stylo.builder is where I'm running the main function. And hopefully it works. What it does is it takes in a markdown string, and then it parses it and transforms it into through a few steps, it eventually transforms it into HTML, which it printed off here. I don't know if it worked, but I forgot. If I go like this, I can put it into example.html, and then I can open that in the browser, and we can actually see what it looks like. I might have done something wrong. We'll see. Let's just do this. Open. Yeah. Okay, so something went wrong because it only parsed the header, not the I wonder if that I'm wondering if this, I have no idea what I'm doing. That's maybe a theme here. Unterminated quote, yeah. Okay. Heading. Into xargs I Clojure, main is stylo.builder, and put in quotes. Yeah. Okay, so this is wrong. Let's see if I could figure out a different way to show this for a minute. Well, that's okay. Just figure it out. Figure it out. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to load the... Oop. If I go... No. I'll get the buttons right one time. There we go. Okay, so what I just did there, I have a keyboard shortcut, Alt Enter, and it sends the code block to the REPL. So what you see is this here. And what this is it just loaded the namespace, stylo.builder, and required all of these different things. So now I'm in that namespace, stylo.builder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to load the rest of these things here. Nope, again, I'm doing the wrong button. Here we go. Extensions. And so this is one example of where this workflow doesn't make a ton of sense. I'm going manually and loading all these different things in into the REPL one at a time. It doesn't make sense. There's got to be a better way to do that. So here's the main function that I was running from the terminal earlier. It takes markup as a string and it runs markdown to page on the markup. And then, so what that does, where is that function? Another problem is if I haven't worked on something in a bit, I might forget where I put other functions and stuff. So, like I keep saying, got to work on the workflow a little bit. Okay, so this function, markdown arrow page, emits a string of HTML, like valid HTML5 string with new lines and stuff like that. And then I've just been dumping that through the terminal into a file. But I can run all of those functions just the same from in here in the REPL. So I could define a define ASDF as slurp example.md. Right, so there, slurp is a funny name, but it just takes a file name with options as a string, like I did, example.md, and makes it a string, so it'll just print it there. And then def ASDF is define this symbol to be that string, right? So that's, then I just write ASDF and it's right there. The symbol points to that string. MB. Then what I can do next is, I think I built everything. Okay. Right. Now, let me go. Now I could technically run main on the markup, but oops. There we go. Let's just run md into page on ASDF. Okay. So it spit out the HTML. Did it work? So it's maybe unclear, but like there's a bunch of front matter here that has some default styling that I have to make the documents look nice. I have not yet made a option to just compile it to like just the H1 paragraph tags. That would probably be useful, so then you could theoretically have a template and you run this and then shove it into whatever template you already have, but I'm not worrying about that too much because I'm currently the only one using this, so it doesn't matter all that much. But what I'm looking for here is this, which looks correct in here. So now what I'm going to do is spit, which is the opposite of slurp. It writes the file. Spit into x.html, the result, which is md to page of ASDF. Okay, now if I go to this page and refresh, hey, there we go. So this is an example markdown file, as it says right on there. So the reason it doesn't work in the terminal is probably related to the fact that I don't actually know how xargs works, and I have to do maybe the manual of xargs. Cool. Anyway, maybe I don't solve this right now, but it'd be really nice to have a command line utility kind of wrapped nicely so that I could just send in any markdown string from the local computer or from a remote, like I could write markdown notes on my phone and use shortcuts, the shortcuts app here, and like just write the note and send it to the computer and have it automatically parse it into HTML and upload and all that kind of stuff. Who knows, I could do just neat automations, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Doesn't matter right now. I'm curious now. So this is kind of like nothing special, right? It's just a markdown parser. There's millions of these. It's not overly complicated, and honestly, mine's not special in any way, except that I'm working on, oop, that's the wrong button. Working on making extensions to this, so it's not really markdown anymore. It's markdown with other stuff in it, and that other stuff runs different code and then ends up with different results. So the first example of that is making diagrams using SVG. And my first pass idea at all of that is this kind of weird idea where I write in there extension, that's what EX is, opening tag, closing tag. I would love it to be like this, but for reasons of laziness, it was, I didn't want it was too hard for me to just have it end with a close bracket, because what I write inside the extension is Clojure code. And if you can't detect, like, I didn't want to have to figure out how to make it detect just a close bracket that matches this. There's probably a way to do it in a smart way, but it wasn't that important for me to do, so I did this thing where it's theoretically it works. There's a lot of problems with all this and that's what I'm working on over time. But I think this should work right away. So in here, this is an extension spot, right? And you can run Clojure code. And then the above result is from a Clojure function. So if I save that, head over to this and run this again, head back here. Oh, silly. Actually, if I want to just keep rerunning things, I have to do this instead, because ASDF won't change because I defined it already, and it's immutable. Like it doesn't. There's no connection to the file anymore. It just pulls it in as a string, and now it's in memory. So instead, just to keep reusing the command in the REPL, it just makes more sense to actually just write the slurp line right in there, because then if I change the file and come back here, it'll get the new string. X.md. Oh, and it didn't work. Here's inspect element. Another weird thing, when it successfully builds the HTML file, I'm not handling errors very well. Like it's literally just printing into the main tag here what the error was. That's not a very convenient way to look at errors, so another thing to work on. I think there's more things to work on than not, but I kind of think that's the nature of these projects anyway. This is also, as a side thought for a moment, I want to open source all these sorts of things that I'm working on, but there's really, like, truly not much point unless I really nail down a nice workflow and have good error handling and stuff. Like, the usability of this library is not good. It's only usable by me because I know what I did. And that's very clearly not the right way to do development for anything that you want people to use or even yourself to use in the future. So that actually, another side thought for a moment, that is kind of why I want to be doing these on a stream like this, because I do need to get better and more serious about my programming, right? I can make fun tools, but if they're not going to be well architected and designed so that other people can use them, I kind of think of it a little bit as a waste of even my own time. So this stream is a little bit of a forcing function for me to just get better at software design and actually producing tools that other people can use and want to use. So that, like I said, a little side tangent, but this is very clearly not good enough yet. But what's happening anyway? I don't know. Let's see here. String expecting this. I wonder. I briefly tried. I have two grammars here that are that I could parse with. Man, I may have messed this up a little more than I thought. Okay, let me briefly tangent for a moment again. Let me clear this and try to see what's going wrong. Okay, let's start here. So this, right? I'm using a really awesome library called Insta Parse. And Insta Parse lets you write grammars that then get built into a parser. I believe the parser itself is a like a state machine or finite, something like that. I'm not quite smart enough to know the implementation of it at this time. I have to study it more because it's really cool. But all that aside, you can write your grammar and define it, right? Like it's just a string here, and then you can make it into a parser, a proper parser, which I did. Let's see. Here, doc parse is the function that is built from insta/parser, and it's the string of a combination of the markdown parser, and these are extension strings that I have. So -ex is the grammar that detects the open close, that detects these, and then the string inside those open and closing tags gets passed into a transformer later. So this is the parser here, and then this is the hiccup transformers. So let's see if I can doc mb doc parse. Is it defined? Hey, it is doing something. Okay, so I'm gonna do heading and then a new line, and then this is para. Okay, so doc parse is running, but it's actually giving an error because of how my grammar is defined. And this is still a quirk. I haven't figured out a smart way to do this yet, but I need two new lines at the end of the file, and then it parses it correctly. So that's what happened there. So let me clear the screen and rerun that command. So this is just a list of vectors with tags in them. So HD is the rule in the grammar that matched this particular string, and then para similarly is the rule that matched that string. And so you get a whole list on a big document, right? You'll get the whole list of all the rules tagged out like that. Then what you can do is those lists of tags and strings you can run through transformers. And so what that is, the transformations are applied by, for this tag, so let's see, HD heading, run this function on that vector, or on the string. So transform heading, that's a function there, and which is actually right here. So in this instance, transform heading, I can actually run that, transform heading, because it's just a function. If I imagine the heading string is heading like that, I can run that, and the transformer, it counts the octothorpe, so the hashtags at the front, and then sets the appropriate header level, and then builds that tag there. So if I run the same thing with 3 hashes here, it'll say H3 instead. Yeah. So this is still a vector with a tag there, but this is now in what in the Clojure community is probably people would recognize it right away as hiccup, which is a pretty, in my opinion, really a pretty nice way of describing HTML documents. And then you can run the hiccup compiler to produce an HTML string from it. So I can now show you if I do, I think I just have it there, HTML. Yeah, so HTML is just the symbol that points to the Hiccup compiler in this namespace. So if I run this on, I'm gonna just manually type out the heading like I have there, right? This will spit out, I believe it's a string, properly formatted. It'll have H3 tags on either side and the word heading in the middle. Yeah. So this is just HTML now. And it works if I do H1. It also works on things that aren't like actual HTML tags. Like this is just ASDF. You can do a really long one and it'll make those tags. So you can use it to do, I don't know much about it, but if you're defining your own web component stuff, you can just go ahead and use it on this, no problem. Oops. I'm not the fastest person to use keyboards, but it's okay. What was I doing? Yeah, HTML. Right, like you could imagine you make some custom, I think those are called web components. It's like you make a tag of your own with JavaScript and blah, blah, blah. So you can use Hiccup for that. But then, to get back to what the code actually does, you run your parser, you get out of the parser a list of tagged strings, right? Which you can then run through further transformations, which then produces Hiccup, which you can then run the Hiccup compiler on to produce HTML. So basically it goes input string goes to, this is not valid code, it's just, I'm just drawing the diagram. The input string goes through the parser, which makes a tagged list, I guess you could call it, which makes Hiccup, which makes HTML, right? Which then you can set out to a file. So that's the process. It seems perhaps a little complicated, but it's really quite nice. I mean, the parser itself, right, with Insta Parse, it's just a string grammar, which I have to learn more about how to make it really concise and not full of errors and stuff, or full of errors, just more sensible than it currently is, but it's relatively simple. The tagged list is basically the same as Hiccup. It just, sometimes it's literally just changing the name of the tag to transform it. And then HTML to a file is, okay, that's very normal. So it's not overly crazy, but the way I'm implementing extensions right now is also kind of naive. It's not the most ideal, especially if you want to give it out to other people, because if here, let me show the transform of an extension. So it'll be transform-ex somewhere in here. At least I thought it was. Oh, I'll put it here. Right, so transform-ex here, it takes the text in, and remember, inside the ex tags in the markdown file, the text that ends up running through this function will be theoretically valid Clojure code, so it'll just be parentheses everywhere. I did something here. Read string. Oh, yeah. Okay. I know what this is for. Which I should probably just put a little note here. Let me explain it first for a second. So all this is doing, it's inside here, string / replace the text, replace any new lines with nothing. So it's just stripping new lines. And then that string, so it's going to end up as a string. So imagine I have divided by, so I just have that. That's what the string would be. Before it might have, well, whatever, not what I wanted. It'll have, say, a new line here, right? So in the markdown file, you wrote one function, then you pressed enter and you wrote another function, and then another one, and so on, so that you can read it. This function just gets rid of all those new lines, so it's just S expressions, one after another. And then it just adds to the front of the string this, and to the back of the string that. So then, so the reason I did that is because you can then, you have a string that looks like this. Oops. And what that then is a list of expressions. And then if you eval that, or pardon me, before you eval, if you read the string, it'll turn it into proper Clojure code again. Read string. So now that's a list of expressions. Then you can map eval. And this is why I mean it's a naive implementation, because I'm just using eval to evaluate the code in the REPL. It's probably not safe. Like, people could run malicious code through the markdown parser with using eval, so probably something I want to think about a little more carefully. But if I map that eval onto this list, it'll, one at a time, it'll evaluate those expressions. And that's all. So it just returns it in a list here. And then, so when that's running and producing the HTML, what ends up happening is the results of the functions that you run end up getting placed inside hiccup tags, which then get rendered out to the HTML. So that's the idea with that. It works when it works, but back to this, I have to figure out why it's not working. So I'll see if I can fiddle with that a little bit. Okay, so let me just see. This has code in it? Yeah, so it's got an EX tag in there now. So if I doc parse that, doc parse this. Okay, so this is the error. This is the same error that was right here. It's just conveniently in the REPL and not weirdly inside the markup. So I can try figure out what I've done wrong. Okay, so Don't need that open right now. Don't need that. Man, I kind of wish this were all working nice and smooth and could show an actual document a little more smoothly, but that's okay. I'll just work through it. So the above is the result. Yeah, so this is the string that's not working. Is it because... Oh, it might be just the new line problem if I save that. So this is the way the parser and the way the grammar is set up. It currently, distracting myself. It only knows that the file is ended if there's two new lines in a row there. So I need always two new lines like that. And I think that might actually fix the problem. Yeah. So the reason I know that is just, so instead of producing this error, this map that is the error, it is outputting the list of tagged strings now. So that does mean, let's see if I can just go back up enough. Okay, let's see now. There we go. Okay, so let's go, I'll go back a little further and explain it again. So this number here, 4, I did not type that into the document, right? I typed multiply 2 by 2. I'm also going to do, I'll actually define a whole function in here. Got to give it a name. Hello x, and it'll string hello space x. Right. So if I save that, build the HTML, nothing changes because this is just a function. I haven't actually called the function. So let's actually call it. Hello Twitch? Sure. Hello Twitch. And I'll just, hello future me editing this. There. Back this way. All right, see, so now it just actually ran the functions and output them here correctly, theoretically correctly. So I want to see if this will actually work properly now. I have, from the last quilt pattern that I made for my mom, I actually have I have some of it here. I didn't put the whole thing in to showcase what I'm actually trying to use this for. Now hopefully this will run. I'll have to see. I'll just run it in the REPL because that might be easier. Instead of, let's do, wait, is that the name of the file? Yeah. Hey, it did something. Okay, so the name of the pattern was pivot point. Yes, okay, here we go. So these aren't supposed to show up. I'm not sure why they are, but that's, for the purposes of this demonstration, that's not a problem. This here is really what I want to show, because I think this looks really nice. Oops. The idea here is this is an HTML page, but my mom sells PDFs of the designs. So you see all these page breaks here because I manually put in page breaks so that when I printed it from Firefox, I would print to PDF and it would line things up nicely. Handling HTML to PDF is something that I definitely want to not have to do through Firefox. I want to include it in the functionality of the builder and everything. But that, I think, is a bigger, that's quite a big task, I think. So for the few patterns I've done so far, putting in those page breaks by hand and just printing it with Firefox, PDF, like print to PDF, has worked out quite well actually, but it's not flawless. There's definitely cases where weird printing errors and stuff, so there's a lot of work to do there, but I know how to get around the problems to actually make the PDF, so I think what might even be cooler is eventually I could actually just suggest that we sell the files as HTML. And what you could do then is you could embed like little JavaScript snippets that say change the color of the fabric if you click it. Like you could pick your own colors, and then you could print off from the HTML on your own if you're a user of the pattern. You could print it off with the colors that you want. You could, even theoretically, you could have a little thing at the top that has dimensions, and it automatically scales the dimensions of all of these things up or down based on if you want the quilt to be scaled up 1.25 times, then all of these things are different. See, I'm noticing here that something is going weird with, like, these are supposed to be compiled and actually displaying, but they're not. So I don't know. I do swear that I had a version of the stylo library and the pivot point pattern that fully worked, and I have that in the archive, like in my portfolio archive on my computer. But for the purposes of showing this, that's totally fine. So that's basically what it does. In a minute, I'm going to show something that I'm actually working on for myself, using the same ideas as this, but a different extension. But let me see here. I'm going to pare down the example even more. Okay, so I don't need this text. I don't need that page break in there. I actually don't need this either. Okay. So that's that. Yeah. One thing I did here, and this was a cheat. You can, in the Markdown definition or spec, whatever it's called, if you can call Markdown an official spec, there is a way to put image links in there. I didn't bother to mess around with that part of the parser grammar yet. I don't think it works properly, but that's a me problem, and this was just a workaround. So what I did here is just write the hiccup manually for the link to the image that I wanted to embed there, or not embed, to display there. So obviously a bit of a hack, but it works. Get rid of this and these tables. The tables are also really, really messy looking in text here, because I'm embedding SVGs into some of the columns here, and it looks really messy. So I kind of want to figure out a better way to define tables as well, but I have no ideas for that at the moment. I also don't know if I built the parser or the transformer for the tables in a smart way. These are all examples of things that, like, I got a thing working for the purpose of outputting a result. In this case, a pattern for my mom's quilts. But they're not necessarily optimal. But you don't always need optimal, right? You just need something that works, and then you know where you can improve later on. Like, I have a whole list of these things that I've just been talking about that I can smooth the edges down in the library itself. And my idea is to keep doing these kinds of projects over and over. So I iterate on the projects themselves. The projects are complete at some point, but the library is always improving on them. And I like that iterative approach. It's really nice because the projects themselves are the thing that, like, it's really exciting to actually have produced something. using code that you wrote, but then the code that you're using, you just kind of, it's never totally done, but it's always useful, and that's just really compelling. So hopefully more and more of that shows up through these streams as I go, because I like that a lot. But let me now just close. Let me just delete more of this stuff because I don't need it. Okay, so one other thing I did here, let me just start. Example begins, I think. I have all this front matter on this particular pattern where, well, first of all, I'm loading the file fabric.clj, and that file, I can open up here, fabric, is where I have the extension code for it, and it has the definition for SVG, point string, scaling, translate, rotate, scale string, and scale. These are functions that are useful for actually making those diagrams using code. So they're pretty terse, right? ln is line, arrow is arrow, square, rectangle. This HST is half square triangle. That's an abbreviation of a quilting term where you have your square of fabric and you cut it along the diagonal and you have two half square triangles. It's just useful to have that as a shorthand. Theoretically, if I make the language simple enough, I could even have my mom learn how to write some of the basics. I don't know if I'll actually do that, but you know, it's cool to use the terminology of the domain that you're programming in. So dot is like an actual dot for indicating highlights and stuff like that. And stack is, you can give it any SVG element and it'll stack, like it'll create a visual stack of those things given the number. So if you want a stack of 5 squares, it'll paint a square, offset down and right, paint another square, and do that 5 times, so it looks like you have a stack of 5 squares. It's kind of silly, but it's really actually quite useful for visual reference. So here, these are stacks of 2 of these blocks. It's just a good shorthand visual reference so people can, I don't know, it's nice to display information in a few different ways so that people are more and more attuned to the reality of whatever you're writing in the instructions, I find. So if you have stack and then the number 2 times there, people are even more likely to know that you need a stack of 2. It seems silly, but it's actually quite useful. So that's just fabric there. So if I go back to the example here, it loads it, and then use that just imports all of the symbols of those functions directly into this namespace here. And this is the reason why I think I need to rethink the extensions, because I have another extension that I'm working on that has some names that I want to be the same. Like, so this is a 2-dimensional diagrams and stuff. The other one I'm working on, I want to make 3-dimensional diagrams. In either case, you could make a line, but a line that produces a 3D object is very different than a line function that produces just a 2D one. So I have to create weird-looking names or figure out a better way to have symbols imported properly without needlessly clashing on symbol names. But anyway, all this front matter doesn't ever display, but these are just various parts for setting up the visuals and the colors of the different fabric types. So that's what all this is here. This style tag, this actually just compiles directly to a style tag with CSS strings inside it, right? So this is a string and it's just CSS. I just made it compact because all it was colors. So that's that. Let me just, for old time's sake, just do this one more time. See what it looks like. It doesn't work. I broke it. Broke it again. And it's probably just this. Another thing that I don't like. Nope. There we go. Okay, so now the reason I was doing that, let's see. So here, let's zoom this a little better. There we go. Now I can explain what I'm trying to do. So, okay, all this front matter doesn't end up being rendered as anything. Example begins is what you might expect. This workaround for putting an image here, it produces the image and the heading. This heading here. And then this list creates a list of an ordered list. And then here, this is the code that I wrote that produces this diagram. So you can see here the blueberry point method is the name of this particular style that my mom uses. This is just a normal paragraph after the diagram, but there's all kinds of repetitive sorts of bits of code here to produce these things. Now, repetitive isn't necessarily bad. I mean, this is a pretty direct way of drawing. Like, what's a perfect example? Okay, I'll start here. Move this entire set of things to this position, and then, okay, you did all that. Now do that with this label. And this is what I mean by direct. I have one label that says mark on, and then I manually moved this wrong side label here. It wasn't like automatically laid out by the browser or anything like that. That's what I mean by direct. I am putting those numbers in there myself. Now, in practice, it does mean I might, like sometimes if I mistype this, something becomes misaligned. In fact, let me rerun that and refresh this. See that? This moved because this changed. So it's really, this is not a user-friendly method. Now, I happen to really like writing code and doing things that way because it's like fun to kind of visualize it in your head. But I know that there are smarter ways. Well, I suspect that there are more concise ways to kind of have the actual, like the computer actually compute more of these things for me. So that's ongoing problems that I don't know how to solve yet. I need to work on it. But it does, at the end of the day, let me make really nice looking SVG diagrams and pop them into here. Which I'm really proud of already and really happy to keep working on. So it's a lot of fun. One thing that is perhaps really obvious at this point is the workflow is very tedious here. If I change the markdown file, it would be really cool to see the change automatically show up on the rendered view, right? But it doesn't. So I'm working on file watchers and servers in my code here that I can run with the CLI. So the idea is stylo watch example.md, press enter, and it will start the watcher in the background so you have access to your terminal, and it'll open on your local host that file, the output, the HTML, and then anytime you change the MD, automatically update. So I found this, someone already made a live server, so it's not built into my code, but this is an example of how it could totally work. So I think if I go localhost 8080, yeah. So here, so I've loaded up the example, and you see here that changes are happening. Now, if I save a change in this folder at all, it'll automatically refresh. So let's do something like this. 0. Oh, of course, the problem still is that, yes, the page refreshes, but changing the markdown doesn't change the HTML file. So that is something I have to do here. I have a manual testing thing here, and I have this file watcher. So instead of watching that, I'm going to watch example.md. You can see once again how all of this setup stuff is not, it's just not smooth. It's just not handy enough yet, and I'm building all these things backwards. Build, build, build. None of this is, all of this needs improving, and that's what this is for. All of these things will be improved. Hopefully sooner rather than later, because I want this to be better than it is. Okay, so now I do believe when I make a change, if I save this, the watcher, W, should detect a change. Maybe I didn't actually build it. Well, let's stop it. Start it. Build. Okay. Oh, of course. That's the wrong file name. There we go. Oh, I just stopped it immediately. Not what I wanted. Now if I go here and just save it, there we go. Okay, it actually built, and I don't know what changed. Let's do this. Well, things are changing, but for a moment I need to go to the washroom. So I'm going to mute things for a moment. I don't think I actually muted this yet though. Okay. I think we're good. All right, enough of this. All right, so let's make a more drastic change. Let's just get rid of this line entirely. Is that going to do anything? Maybe I'm doing something wrong with that. What I'm trying to show off is automatic refreshing of this thing with some actual changes in the code, and it's not doing it. Am I building to a different, maybe it's this, maybe I'm looking at the wrong, there we go. Okay, gotta look at the right file. Jeez. So I have too many examples and too many file names that are almost the same, and I'm not paying attention. So okay, let me show that off then for a minute. Now obviously, so I made the change, and this, there we go, it changed right there. So if I redo that, this will disappear. So I'm going to save, wait for it to rebuild on my Clojure side in the REPL. Obviously it's not the fastest, and there it's disappearing. So that's another thing to work on, is the speed of the so the watcher detects things relatively quickly, and the build itself happens quickly, but there's something that I just had naively, like this watcher is just, it's a naive one. I found it, Juxt is the name of the company that provided this Clojure library, and it watches an entire directory, not just any file, right? So what I'm doing is just filtering out, ignore everything unless it happens to be the particular file name that you specified. But there's almost certainly a way to make that a faster thing too. Because it feels, when you have a workflow like this where you make a change and it's not like it's showing up somewhere else, I kind of think you want things to be as instantaneous as possible, right? Like this is an example, right? Like I wrote code in the middle window here. I pressed my keyboard shortcut and essentially immediately got the result out in the REPL here. So that loop, or that way of working, you're writing and you're seeing basically live, lets you make changes, small changes very rapidly over and over again, and you kind of build up a working program over time. And, or in the case of what I'm trying to do here, a working document. Let's see, sorry, I'm just looking at my stream stuff for a minute. I think it's okay. A lot of this stuff I'm learning on the fly. Encoding overloaded, for example. I don't know what that means. Find out. It's not a problem. I'm just gonna work with it. Okay. So I'm not going to stream for too much longer today. I showed off, this is a snippet of an actual quilt pattern that I did make for my mom. The ideal workflow is you write the document, you see the rendered view, and it's basically instantaneous, which I don't have yet, but it's not terrible. It's getting better, and I know a few things I can do to make it a smoother process, so that's good. But this is not the only extension that I'm working on. I also have this thing here this is a project that I'm working on called Standing Point. It's a very simple, it's just going to be like a plywood standing desk that you put kind of close to the entrance of your house or apartment, and it'll be at a comfortable height where you can just work. Let's say you want to do some writing for 30 minutes, or you need to answer emails, but you don't want to be at your main working desk. That's kind of the idea. And I want to make a design that uses only plywood so that anyone can download the design and go to their hardware store and build it themselves with either no or minimal tools. Now, I don't know what that actually is going to look like yet. I haven't finished the design at all, but that's what this project is. And it's using a different extension that right now I'm calling Chunk, because it's, I don't know, it was funny. It's a chunk of stuff because it's a 3D sort of view as opposed to just 2D diagrams. So I'm going to see if I can build that and show that off for a minute, and then I'll end the stream after that. Wait a minute. That didn't send. There we go. So I just turned off the watcher, and the server's off too. So it's not going to be doing any live stuff anymore. I'm going to slurp standing. Wait, it doesn't. Yeah, standing point .md. Yeah. Okay, so that's working. Well, of course, it's just opening a file. Doc parse slurp. Ooh. Oh. Standing dash, not dot. Okay, there we go. So what I'm doing is I'm just checking the various steps. So the file loads as a string, no problem. That string is successfully parsed with doc parse, and into hiccup should work no problem. Of this. Oh, this is what I was talking about earlier a little bit here. So ROT already refers to this symbol in the namespace stylo.builder. So I've just created a problem for myself. Actually, the easiest way to solve that, well, the lazy way is to kill the REPL. Yes. No. What have I done? Okay, kill it. Yes. Okay. Restart the REPL in this project here. Cider jack in. One huge downside with teaching yourself Clojure and Emacs and stuff is things seem so arcane from the outside. If you don't know what people are doing already, like, it looks cool, I guess, but man, it was so hard for me to hunker down and just kind of grind my way through some understanding. Like, I don't even know the best ways to do all of these things yet. But I can imagine if someone's watching this who has never worked with Emacs or a Lisp or anything, how confusing some of this stuff might seem. If that's something of interest, it might be cool. I might see if I can make some resources for, like, because I'm still, like, very new with having learned all this stuff, and I'm self-taught. it might be cool to make some of the resources for beginners. Something's not working, so will I save it? Yes. I'm just trying to close Emacs entirely. Yes. Yes, I'll kill the processes. And I'll just start Emacs again and just do it the easy way. It's like just resetting your computer, turning it off and on again. Classic troubleshooting techniques. Let me open up dev stylo.org. Okay. This should work now. It should in a moment spawn the REPL there. If I did things right. Yes, I did. Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right. Now where was I? Oh yes. Builder. Namespace, parser. Once again, a little too tedious for my liking, but I have no solution off the top of my head. I'll solve this one off stream. Compiler. Okay, now we're at the manual testing, which means I don't actually need to do that necessarily. I could doc parse hiccup of a doc parse of slurp of standing dash point.md. All right, that spit out actual hiccup code. Right, so what I just went through there, I closed Emacs and opened it up again and reloaded the namespace, the builder namespace, because when I was running the 2D example, I quote-unquote polluted the namespace with symbols from the Fabric extension. And what I want to show you now is not using the Fabric extension, but I haven't built a way to not pollute the namespaces, which is to say I am definitely reworking this eventually. I have this namespace stylo.builder and I'm just using it. I'm just shoving all of the extension functions right into that namespace when I should probably be doing something like, you know, generating a namespace stylo.extension.extension name like that, and then put all of the functions in there, and then have a macro run any calls in the markdown and just replace them with the proper namespace call. That's the first thought off the top of my head. I don't know if that's actually a good way to do it, but generally speaking, don't pollute namespaces with stuff if you don't need to. Especially if you're going to use multiple extensions, you could too easily clash a bunch of things. So for the sake of showing this though, I'm just going to do it the silly way. That should be okay for the time being. If I compile this to HTML, that's HTML. But I can actually just do, oh wait, I'm in the wrong namespace for this. So that's all working, but I don't actually need to be, oh no, I'm in the right namespace, but I haven't done this. What am I talking about? Do I have this function defined? Yes, okay. Markdown to page. There we go. Of slurp standing point .md. There we go. Okay. Oh, but I want to do this. If I now spit that into example.html, I'm just going to overwrite it, it's fine. Now, I can go here, refresh this. Alright, so now I have this here, standing point. Design rationale, blah, blah, blah. And this is what I was building to, showing you a little bit. I have just a cuboid function, nothing different yet, and this is far, far from perfect. Because I could do weird things like this. Oh, I have this defined twice. If I comment out this, save that, and I'm just going to manually rebuild it because I don't want to set it up again. So this is what I mean by some major problems. This is a 3D view thing, right? Like these cuboids are 3D objects. They have a width, a length, and a height. So they make an actual box. And the data structure has nodes and edges and faces. But since I'm rendering it to 2D SVG shapes, the order in which I specify the shape itself matters for rendering properly. So what you're seeing here is this cuboid is not being rendered. What I have here is the tabletop, which is this here, and then the legs, which come after it. And so I am drawing those shapes in that order. So it'll put this onto the SVG canvas, or whatever the right term is. And then over top of that, it'll put everything else. So it doesn't look right because it isn't right. So what I don't have yet, and what I need to build, is the idea of hidden lines being removed and like occlusion. So I need an actual camera. I need the idea of a scene. And with that, I should be able to figure out how to occlude things. Now, it does get even more complicated because if you look at the SVG of it all, oops, let me give a little more room here. This polygon, if I just delete it, that was this whole shape here. If that's being occluded, the 3D geometry will be still to that end, but in order to display it on 2D SVG, I have to know, like I need the code to actually draw for me the line segment at that viewing angle, right? So it needs to figure out not only what is occluding what, but where it starts occluding it and where it stops occluding it. So this seems like a fairly large problem that I don't have the direct answer to yet, but it might be nice. And the reason I want to make static 3D views of SVG is because you can make really nice diagrams that way, and you can actually print them off and have like on a plotter or something, right? You can have actual like reference drawings. So I could make dimensions here so that you could take it to a shop and someone who knows how to read the drawings can actually make it for you, that kind of thing. So that's why I want to use SVG. Additionally, SVG is relatively easy to make exportable to DXF, and if you use DXF, you can put that into AutoCAD, and you can do CAD related stuff with it from there. So that's the idea. How easy it is, I'm not sure about yet, but I'll get there. I I also have another version of the function that doesn't draw the faces. It only draws a wireframe, and with wireframes, it's actually... Oh, I guess I don't have a wireframe function. I thought I did. Well, let's add one then. There we go. Chunk, draw edges, it was draw edges. So anyway, it maybe could be called wireframe. If I only draw the edges, it produces a 3D wireframe. And wireframes don't really have the occlusion problem because it's only showing line edges like this. So now you actually can't tell what's in front and what's behind. Like this looks exactly the same as what I had before. The problem with a wireframe is it can be quite confusing to see it, especially in like pure isometric projections or orthographic, which I guess that's what this is. If this tabletop were a square, this leg here at the front and this leg at the back, they would line up perfectly and it would look really confusing, or it would have the potential to look really confusing. Let's see if I can make that an example here. Let's just change all the just moving them around. Oops. Build. Yeah, so this is what I mean. This leg at the front here and this leg at the back, in this section here, because of the way the camera's looking at it, and the projection is not a perspective projection, it's what you use in CAD programs a lot is orthographic. You can't really tell what's going on here. That's very ambiguous and confusing. So that's why wireframe is useful sometimes, but almost certainly not sufficient for detailed CAD stuff. Sorry about that. Just checking the time. So that's why I want the draw faces function. But it needs to incorporate better management of this kind of stuff. So that's still confusing too, right? You can imagine if someone was looking at this and had to make it with no other detail, it looks like you've got a three-legged table where this third corner leg is made up of, for no reason, two different pieces, and it's like glued or welded or something. That's obviously too ambiguous. So these are all gonna get improved over time. Now I'm gonna end this stream soon, but I actually wasn't gonna solve the camera scenery problem with this yet today. What I was going to do next was make, instead of just a cuboid here, I want to add some other functions that make 3D shapes. I was going to add a function that looks kind of like this, extrude, and then you're going to have a shape, and then you're going to, it's either extrude the height and then the shape itself, or extrude shape and then the height. Whatever makes more sense, I don't know yet. Where shape is basically a 2D collection of edges, or of vertices and edges, essentially arbitrary. And then extrude just would take that shape, make a copy, and offset all of its like make a copy where its z coordinates are offset by the height that is provided. The reason is you can just default it to the XY plane, extrude it out the Z direction, and then you can use rotate functions to position it in any direction that you want. So I was going to build the extrude function, but that'll be a task for my next stream, which I think for this month what I want to do is try stream a little bit every day. I don't know that I'll keep that cadence up forever, but I want to build streaming in as like an actual habit that I do regularly. So forcing myself for at least a month to do it every day seems like a really good way to get the old brain to just get used to it. So in theory, I should be back here tomorrow around the same time working on an extrude function for this stylo chunk library. But for right now, I'm gonna get going. There. I'm gonna end it really cheesy with a message. Alright, I had a lot of fun. I'm definitely gonna be back tomorrow. Have a good one.